everybody. Welcome to Paranormal Addicts Podcast, Season 2, Episode 27. We were late, and I apologize, but StreamYard was being a pain again. But better late than never, I guess. My guest today is Joe Franke. Most of you guys already know him probably, but we'll start out like we always do, Joe, and just introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll get rolling into the questions.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Kent. My name is Joe Franke. I'm a paranormal researcher. I've been involved with the paranormal for about 40 years now. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Warren Society for Paranormal Research and Education. And I'm happy to be on today, and I apologize for the StreamYard hiccup.
Well, it happens. So obviously we've been Facebook friends or whatever for a long time. But
Yes.
Interesting fact for the people out there, we actually share the same agent now. So she's a good person, and so that's how I finally got you on my show again. So, we'll start out like we always do with our icebreaker questions, and they seem a little elementary for our conversation, but it's a good way to start out anyway. So
Sure.
The first question is a two-part question, and that is, what is your favorite location you investigated, and what is your bucket list location that you would like to investigate?
Well, kind of both of those I could sum up in one answer is I just returned from California recently, last week and a half ago. And one of my favorite places wasn't really an investigation, but I wanted to see Alcatraz. And I also wanted to see the Winchester Mystery House. Didn't get to investigate it yet, but those two were on my bucket list. So hopefully making plans with my colleagues and friends out in the California area to set up a time when we could go out and investigate. But one of my favorite places was the Winchester Mystery House. I've heard, all the stories about it and talked to the tour guide, actually talked to the manager that runs the whole place. And she was telling us some wild stories of interactions that their customers and their staff have had out there. Up until now, my career in the paranormal basically has been helping families doing residential cases. I have done some public things, but those are also to help like business owners. One of my famous cases was in a town called Meriden, Connecticut, where a friend of mine had a restaurant / bar, and they had pool tables and dart boards and things like that. And they had a pretty nasty presence there for many years. And the property itself was almost 300 years old. And then just a couple of years ago, they finally sold it and they razed the place to the ground and they built a Taco Bell on it. So it's probably one wicked haunted Taco Bell, I could tell you. But
yeah,
So I do primarily a lot of residential stuff because I'm here to, we in the society are here to help people with their paranormal afflictions if they are paranormal in nature. A lot of times, a very high percentage was where people don't need the kind of help that we provide. They may need other kind of help, counseling or psychological care or something like that. But I do have quite a few places on my bucket list. I'd love to go. I want to visit some of the castles over abroad in Scotland and England and Ireland. So many places I'd love to visit, but haven't had the opportunity yet.
Yeah. All the castles in England those are like my bucket list. I'll probably never have the opportunity. My family came from Scotland, so I love the history of Scotland, and Alcatraz is actually my bucket list location as far as places that are semi-realistic. I mean, I may actually be able to get to Alcatraz someday. And I completely agree, Joe. Residential cases are what I live for. I don't get as many as I would like being here in Western Kentucky because paranormal is still not openly talked about very much.
Yeah.
It's a little better, but like I was born with my gifts, with my abilities, and growing up a lot, I was actually told point blank that I was a tool of the devil and I was going to hell.
Oh,
So yeah,
who told you that?
lots of people.
Oh, jeez.
And so yeah, I mean, obviously, I didn't let it change me. I learned how to use my abilities. It was when I was 13 is when I really set it in my mind to learn how to use my abilities.
Right.
Funny story I tell everybody, and it's actually in my book. But this is one of my favorite funny stories, just to tell everybody. So, like I said, I was born in Paducah, Kentucky. We're not only the heartland, we're not only in the Bible Belt, but we're like in the capital of the Bible Belt. Churches on every corner. So back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when I was growing up and a teenager, it wasn't something that was openly talked about.
Yeah.
So when I was 13, I had an experience that made me decide that I had to learn to use my abilities. I had a relative come to me after she passed and told me she had passed, and she told me not to be sad that she had crossed over, but she wanted to tell me to not be afraid of my abilities, to use them. So at that point, I decided I needed to use my abilities. So I started the only resources I had back in those days. So this was 1987. 1987. The only resources I had back then was Robert Stack or Unsolved Mysteries when they did and then checking out books. So I went to the school library and the public library, and I checked out every book I could on paranormal. I checked out all the I checked out all the books by the Warrens. Those were like my Bible at that time. That was my best source of information. So, but I actually got called down to the principal's office for checking out these books. The principal actually looked at me and was like, "Should we be concerned?" So yeah. But yeah, we love residential cases because to me and my team, that's why we're here. Is to help the people. And like you said, a lot of times it's not actually paranormal, but so either way. So all right, the next icebreaker question is, what kind of paranormal investigation style do you use? Do you consider yourself like an old school investigator, a scientific investigator, a hybrid? Just what's your investigation style?
Well, I mean, I would say it's a hybrid. I mean, because I've evolved through the years. When I started back in 1986 as a teenager, I mean, I didn't know anything. I was under the tutelage of Ed and Lorraine, and back then we used obviously tape recorders, magnetic tape recorders. We didn't have digital recorders then. We didn't have digital cameras then. We used regularly 35 mil. We used Polaroid cameras. I remember Ed saying to me, he said, "You know what? A good investigator always carries a flashlight and a bottle of holy water." So, very basic. So obviously you want to take a very scientific approach. I tell folks, if something happens that you can't explain, look for a natural explanation for it. I mean, the term paranormal basically means, that which is above and beyond a scientific explanation. But you have to look first. You can't just, if you hear a noise or a scratching noise or a growling noise, you don't want to automatically take the nuclear option and say, "I got a demon in my house." I mean, you got to investigate. You got to do your research. That's why, I like the term paranormal researcher. I use that instead of paranormal investigator, because the investigation part is part of the research. Do your research on the property, on the people, on the history of the home. Who owned it? Were there any deaths in the home? Were there any violent acts? Were there, murder, suicide? Was there what we call a psychologically impacted property? You want to look at cover all the bases. You want to look at everything first. I say it's like taking a 1,000-piece puzzle and dumping it out on the table. And you use all kinds of different methods. You do your research. You could bring in psychic mediums, people that did, and they're all pieces of that puzzle. You don't base your case on what a psychic says, or even a couple of psychics. You try to reach out people like yourself using your gifts. Hey, what information can you provide for the history of this home? or do you have a connection to this person? You have someone from the other side coming through that can give us some information. So I'm a very old school because I'm an old guy now. I don't employ a lot of this modern equipment. I'm not poo-pooing it because I know a lot of investigators out there that like this equipment. It's just that I don't use it. I have never needed it. A lot of this stuff is unproven scientifically. Yeah, you might have a REM pod that will go off when there's EMF around, but your body emits EMF. That's why if you go within a couple of feet of it, it's going to go off. But just because it's sitting over in the corner of the room for a couple hours being quiet and then it goes off, it doesn't mean there's a spirit there. What does it mean? Well, I don't know. Is it near an electrical outlet? I mean, the way that I investigate the paranormal cases that I've done years ago, for many years, is I've asked the homeowner, in order for me to do a proper baseline sweep, I got to turn the power off in the house. So, I wouldn't do it, and none of my team would do it. I said, ask the homeowner or the business owner, or whatever the case may be, would you be willing to turn the power off for 20 minutes or so? You're not going to spoil any food in the fridge or the freezer. It's going to be fine. Well, let's turn the power off and then do a sweep through and see what you get as far as the baseline readings. Now you're also going to have power outside, commercial power coming into the building or the home. That's understandable. But you got to, take all those pieces of the puzzle together and try to fit them together to get a picture of, okay, this is what you're telling me is happening. Okay, let's figure out why this is happening. All right, it's kind of I used to call it the 5 why method. Why is something happening? If you ask the right questions, you might have one question, depending on the response or the evidence that you gather, may lead to 4 or 5 other questions. There's no real cookie cutter approach to these things. Each case may be similar, albeit that they're very different. And my experience, in residential cases are, people may have activity in their home for different reasons. You could have you could have a spirit that's attracted to a person, an object, the home itself, or it may be nothing. You might have scratching sounds or noises coming through the ceiling or the walls that could be animal infestation. It could be termites for all I know. It could be mice. It could be squirrels, raccoons. We've had all that. And the joy that it brings to me is when you can give that natural explanation to a person or a family and say, this is what I found during my investigation, and I think this is where your noises are coming from. To see the relief on their face, brings me great joy. And that's my payment, because we don't charge for helping people. Never charge. But it's about doing the proper investigation techniques, crossing all your T's, dotting all your I's. I find that a lot of people, especially the folks with YouTube channels, they go for shock value. Not everybody. I'm just saying, people go for the shock value, and they see something, they hear something, they get something on a recording, and they're quick to say it's paranormal. And they'll say, well, this is what it's saying. Well, I'm not so sure. But once you've said, it said this, that, or the other thing, now you've planted the seed. Now it's psychosomatic. Now it's in my head. If it says, oh, it said your name. Well, that's not what I heard, but maybe deep down, they will that to happen. Oh, something said my name. That's so cool. It's hard to, each case is different. It's hard to explain each case individually. You just have to do your homework. And for those investigators out there that don't have a lot of experience, you want to get experience. And obviously to get experience, you need to do the work. But, you don't want to get experience or get training just from watching television.
Right.
Or YouTube. And I'm not poo-pooing them. I'm just saying, you got to get out in the field and do the work and try to, for lack of a better term, debunk it yourself. If you see something, you hear something, you capture something, try to recreate it. And if you can't, okay, let's look at this from a different angle. But to find something that's truly paranormal is rare, in my opinion. I've done, got thousands of cases over the last 40 years, and you know, a lot of the things can be explained naturally. Sometimes you don't find an explanation, but it doesn't mean there's a spirit there, and it certainly doesn't mean you have a demon in your house. If you had a demonic attachment, you would know it. It would make its presence known.
Right.
But I don't want to scare people and think that I have a demon in my house. Well, I had ABC Paranormal here last night, and they went running out of the house because they heard a growling sound. And I'm like, well, do you have any evidence of that? Was it caught on tape or on video or something? No, they just heard it and they ran out. And I'm like, well, I hate to say it, but if it's not documented, it never happened, because you can't, if you can't recreate it, or if it never happens again, I don't have an answer for you. I didn't experience it myself.
Exactly.
So a lot of this stuff can be explained naturally. Now, if it can't be explained naturally, then maybe you might say, well, maybe there is a supernatural element to it. And maybe it is paranormal. If it defies or goes above and beyond scientific explanation, then you may have something there. But it all depends on the case. I mean, orbs are a big thing. People get involved with orbs. Well, orbs can be explained in many different ways. But a lot of times I'll get an email or a phone call, or somebody will send me a picture through text. Joe, what do you think of this picture? And they're all excited about it. And I'll look at the picture or the video they send me, and I say, well, here's my professional and my personal opinion on it. And if it differs from theirs, they get upset with you. Well, no, I think it's this. And well, look, I'm not going to argue with you about it. You asked me my opinion. I gave you my opinion. But I'm just seeing a photograph or maybe a short video clip, where I get things like light rods or something like that. I'm like, well, it's not a light rod. It's actually a spider web, that's reflecting off the camera, the light on the camera, and some people are very, are relieved, and they're very grateful. But you get other people, they're like, oh, no, I think it's this, and this. I'm like, well, then what'd you ask me for? If your mind is made up, that it's this, or this, well, then fine, you can believe that. I'm not going to tell you not to believe that. I'm not here to, get in an argument with somebody. But I'm just telling you, and from what I've seen through my 40 years in doing this work, this is what I believe you have here. Now some pictures at this end or videos, I'm scratching my head saying, this is interesting. This bears further investigation or further research. And I try to help as many people as I can. I do lecture around the country. I try to do lectures here. I do a lot in Connecticut where I live locally. But I do travel. I like to offer as much education as I can. I tell people, look, I certainly don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. I said, but I like to share my knowledge and my experiences with those who will listen.
Yeah, I mean, I know you like traveling. I mean, something that I know is you actually, the plan as of right now is you're actually traveling to me next year and headlining my expo. So
thank you. I'm looking forward to it, Ken. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
I'm looking forward to it too. So let me just touch base with what you just said. Really, I'm just going to agree more than anything. So yeah, what people have to realize is, everybody talks about, oh, it's the science. I'm doing this scientifically or whatever. We're pseudoscience. We're not a real science.
Right.
And most of the equipment that we have, the fancy new equipment, was originally used for something else and then adapted to the paranormal. Even like the REM pod, like you were saying. So the problem with a REM pod can be a useful piece of equipment. I'm not bashing it, but you have to, any piece of equipment, you have to understand how it works, what its false positives are, what its strengths, what its weaknesses are, before you can even consider it anything. So the main weakness with a REM pod is the antenna, because anything that goes over the antenna is going to set it off. So then we talked about orbs, and I agree wholeheartedly. I'm not saying that there's not real orbs, because I've seen I've seen orbs that are definitely paranormal, but especially somebody experienced like ours, we know the difference between an orb and a bug flying across the screen, across the camera, or dust going across the camera, So yeah, I mean, it's like Bam said here, the best equipment is common sense. So the best piece of equipment, in my opinion, is ourselves. Whether you have a gift or whether you're just an investigator, we're still the best piece of equipment. So
and I agree with that. And there's an old saying that my grandfather used to say. He said the problem with common sense is it's not very common anymore.
Right. Exactly.
And it's just if you're willing to put in the time and the effort to do a proper investigation, and there's many ways to do it. I'm not just saying my way, but my way works for me.
Right.
Is you have to rule out those false positives. And this equipment that, like you said, a lot of it's been adapted. And there's companies out there and people that actually sell ghost hunting equipment. And I don't want to get anybody angry with me. I don't use this stuff because I've never needed it. If you've got a spirit with intelligence, it can make itself known through regular means, like using yourself and your own gifts. We all have gifts. Just some people's gifts are more fine-tuned than others. But I've never had a need for all these different pieces of equipment out there, and I've got an old Gauss meter, EMF, which is great for taking baseline readings. But like I said, turn the power off, shut all the power off, so you got no juice flowing. But you never know, if you're in an old house, you can be in a 200-3-year-old, 100-year-old house, and you've got wires that may be unshielded behind the walls or mice chewed through them, but you're not going to see that unless they're exposed. You want to look in the basement, but you want to be careful. Safety obviously is number one. And I'm not saying safety from ghosts or spirits or demons. I'm talking about, physical safety. People go in these old abandoned hospitals and schools and factory buildings. I'm like, what are you looking for? And some of these videos that I've watched, some of them are very entertaining, but I'm like, within the first 10 minutes of being in there with their camera equipment, they've caught more evidence than I've caught in 40 years. It just doesn't work on command like that.
Right.
And we need to be respectful of spirits that may be there. Right. Because, the spirits that we encounter may have been human. If they're not human and you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be messing with that stuff.
Exactly.
All right, because we as human beings are no match for the demonic.
No. So, you were mentioning, like, made the comment earlier about somebody was like, oh, so this team was in here and they got something ground, so they left. So for my birthday this year, I actually did an investigation at the Monroe House there in Indiana, the mysterious Monroe House. And everybody always talks about the demon in the basement. So me being me, so my birthday is actually January 19th. The investigation actually started on January 18th because that's a Saturday. So at midnight when
Happy belated birthday. Sorry.
So when it became midnight, when it actually became my birthday, I decided I was going to do a solo in the basement just to debunk all this. So I did get some really intelligent responses that I definitely couldn't debunk. I mean, really intelligent. Like, so my style of investigating is this is how I tell everybody, I use the old school techniques with the new school technology. But I'm a very respectful investigator. I respect the living, the dead, the house, everything. So I'm down there and I'm just asking questions to the spirit, whatever the spirit was in the basement. So the first question I asked, of course, first I explained that I was just there to get answers and hear their side of the story. I wasn't there to make him leave or make him mad. I was just there to, just being respectful. So, and then I asked them if they died on the property. And the response I got on the apple box was yes. So then I asked it, I was like, did you die in the house? at the Monroe house, that's an important question because they really don't know if the property is active or if it's the house. They don't really know.
Mhm.
So I asked it if it died in the house. And the response I got was yes. So I was like, thank you for that. I was like, so let's discuss how you died. I was like, did you die from a weapon? Were you shot or stabbed? And the response I got was no. So then I was like, okay, were you physically killed? Were you strangled, beat to death? And the response I got again was no. So at this point, and this was my exact response. You can go back and watch my video. My exact response was, okay, so I'm a little bit confused now. I'm like, you told me you died in the house. And again, I got yes. I was like, you died in the house, but you wasn't physically killed or you wasn't killed by a weapon. And it said yes. I was like, okay, so let's do it a little bit different this time. I was like, can you tell me how you died? And the response I got was fire. Which was a good response because I hadn't mentioned fire, but the Monroe house has burnt down at least 5 times.
Mm-hmm. Did the spirit or alleged spirit identify itself?
Yes. Yes.
Hmm. Well, one thing I want to say, and to anybody that's listening out there that does this, obviously we all want answers to questions, but we have to be careful because when we engage in open conversation with the unknown, okay, that by our own free will, we are inviting things into our lives.
Right.
All right. And I have to say this, folks, because, everybody does it. Everybody does it. Everybody asks questions. We want to find out if there's a spirit here. Well, who are you? How'd you die? All right. However, what you want to do is you got to be very careful because if you're asking questions and it's something more sinister, it's going to identify itself as anything you want it to, because it wants you to allow through your free will to allow it into your life. In other words, I call it doorways to the demonic. You're opening a doorway, and I used to talk to Ed about this a lot. He says, if you're conjuring, and that's a form of conjuring, because you're looking for information, unknown information. It's a form of divination where we're looking for answers that we maybe weren't meant to have. And that's where it gets very dangerous. And it could be dangerous for, ghost hunters and mediums alike and psychics, because, I think that a message that comes in from a psychic medium from the other side is a gift. Okay. That's a gift from God. Okay. But when you're conjuring or using means of divination, such as a Ouija board, which seems to be the most popular instrument out there, now you're playing with fire. And I've seen a lot of cases go south, and now the alleged investigators can become victims themselves. I can't tell you how many calls and emails and messages I've got through the years from people saying, hey, Joe, we were at this house the other night, and now something's following us home, or now I have an attachment. And I'm like, well, what did you do? And it always comes down, well, we had a seance, or we pulled out a Ouija board, or we did this or that. And I get people, oh, I know how to protect myself. I know. I'm like, okay, what did you do? What doorways did you open? But believe me, I'm not impervious to this myself. I've had many, many problems in my life from cases I've worked on. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm just a human being. I don't walk around with a big, S on my chest and a red cape, and but your most powerful weapon is your faith. You have to have faith, you you have to call upon a higher power to protect yourself. And that's where people get in trouble. People think it's cool to go ghost hunting. Well, I felt that way too. I mean, I always tell my audiences, look, I was once where you are now. I was excited about it. I had my recorder, my camera, my flashlight. Let's go to the cemetery. Let's have a good time and have a lot of fun. But then as I grew older and gained more experience, and fortunately I was able to work with people like the Warrens who taught me a lot. I said, there is something to this, and it's not all fun and games. It's not all cool. Because if you get an attachment, it's not like a light switch where you could just turn it on and off. I tell people, like, oh, can you come over and get rid of this? They say, well, I'm not going to show up with a proton pack on my back. I said, that's Hollywood. I said, what I can do is come over to try to discern what you have here, what you did to bring it in, okay, and then give you the best guidance and advice and support that I can based on my knowledge and experience. And you're going to eradicate it. I said, I'm not going to come in and just, say, okay, be gone, Satan. I mean, it doesn't work that way. If you've opened up a doorway, you're going to need to be able to put in the work. Okay. And by that time, people are just terrified. They got all kinds of stuff going on. They might have objects moving in their homes, scratching, growling. They might have marks on their body that came out of nowhere. They could be slapped across the face or thrown across the room, God forbid, in extreme cases, but it's like it all starts with something innocent. Let's go into this old abandoned church or this old abandoned school, or what are you looking for?
Right.
Yeah, it's like, why are you there? Why would you go to a cemetery with a Ouija board?
Right.
The spirits of the people whose bodies are there are not there. It's usually something more dark and sinister that's there, lying in wait, waiting for you to use your free will to open that doorway.
Right. Right.
And once you've opened that doorway and they're in, they're in.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the point I make all the time when I tell people stuff, especially any spirit, especially a demonic spirit. They have to be invited. You can do it unintentionally, like you said, with like Ouija boards or stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But they have to be invited. So that's a good point. We got a couple of questions from Rob. So the first one is, he said, are we under the assumption that we know that they know they are dead? That question always fascinates me. Personally, I'll answer it first, and I'll let you give your opinion, Joe. I don't always assume they know they're dead. I've actually ran into some cases where, especially when I'm dealing with like a child spirit, that they don't necessarily understand that they're deceased. So I think that goes both ways, in my opinion. I don't think we should assume anything because we really don't know what we're dealing with at all. So,
yeah. Well, I would agree. Look, most spirits, I believe, would probably, if they're earthbound spirits, they probably understand that they are no longer among the living. However, why wouldn't they go on to a better place? Well, there could be many reasons for that. There are answers to questions that we want, but we will probably never have in this lifetime. Okay, so if a spirit passes on, why haven't they passed over? Well, maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're afraid that they're going downstairs. Maybe they feel they have unfinished work, or there's still an attachment to a family member or a house or whatever. I believe there's many reasons why spirits are not at rest. And when I go into a place and encounter what we think is a spirit that's not at rest, is we try to help them pass over. It's like I've had cases through the years where, say it's a restaurant that's alleged to have a spirit, and they use that as a means of bringing in customers. I don't agree with that. I said, if there is a spirit there, that spirit may need help crossing over. And I remember this one manager of a restaurant, I think he was the owner, many years ago. He's like, no, I don't want you to get rid of it. I said, look, that's not what I do. This isn't a dog and pony show. I said, if you invited me here to investigate or find out if you had something here, I said, I'm going to tell you up front, if I find a spirit there and I can help him or her cross over, I'm going to do that. I'm bound to do that. I said, I'm not here to just say, oh yeah, you got a ghost here. And Joe Franke said I had a ghost here, and then throw it all over your website and everything. Like, oh, I got validation. That's what a lot of people are looking for. They're looking for validation. They're not looking for help. They're not scared. Oh, I'm not scared of it. I think it's cool. A lot of my customers come just to see if they can have an experience. I have a problem with that. And if you're serious about investigating and helping the spiritual world, okay, then you would agree with me. And there's probably people out there that don't agree with me. And I respect your right to do that. But if I'm at a place and I encounter a spirit, I'm going to try to discern, does this spirit need help? Because they have their own free will as well. If they don't want to cross over, okay, I mean, you can't make the decision for them.
Right.
But as far as going back to the original question, I believe that they know that they're no longer alive, but some of them just don't want to let go. I mean, eventually they'll accept their fate and they'll move on, but sometimes they need us to help them, but then again, you have to be careful you're not toying with something more sinister
Right.
that's disguising itself as, oh, this is grandma that passed away 20 years ago. Probably not so much.
Right.
But these things have the wisdom of the ages. They know everything about you. They can't read your thoughts, but if you are speaking aloud, like if you're walking around asking questions out loud, they can hear you. They're listening. They're waiting for that opportunity, but they can't read your thoughts.
Yeah.
God can. God, you can pray to yourself. You can talk to God in your head, but they can't read your thoughts.
So I agree with all that. Um, you know, yeah, I think it's always important for people to understand. Spirits can come and go as they want. You know, sometimes I guess you may have a stronger spirit holding, but it's still the decision. And I like the fact that you touched on the sometimes the spirit understands that they're going to hell. I actually ran into that. We had the sheriff's department down here where I live. I'm good friends with the deputy sheriff, the chief deputy sheriff. So they called us out to this road with. There's always been reported hauntings, and it's one of the urban legends you hear everywhere. But this time it was actually true. It was a car wreck going to prom. Both of them got killed. But it was true in this case. And we actually made contact with the female first. Her name was Amy, and she told us that she had to cross over. I mean, she was up front. She told me, she was speaking to me through my abilities. She told me that she wasn't crossing over because she wanted to cross over with Eric, which was her boyfriend. Well, so we finally made contact with Eric. And when we kind of made contact with Eric, he was like, he point blank told us, he's like, I appreciate Amy waiting for me, but he's like, I'm still here because I know I'm going to hell and I don't want to go. So she's going to have to cross over without me.
Well, I mean, if a spirit is afraid to cross over because they're afraid that, they just need to ask for forgiveness. That doesn't necessarily mean if you're a bad person in life and you pass away unrepentant that you're going to go to hell. But that's where your faith comes in, because I don't know. I don't have the answers to those questions, but nobody does. It's all, in my opinion, the way I was raised and the way I was taught and trained, it's all on faith. I mean, we're all sinners. I'm probably a bigger sinner than most people, but if you're truly sorry for your sins and you repent for those sins, you'll be forgiven. The truly evil people, let's say like Hitler, I know he's down there shoveling coal, but people like that deserve to be there, but it's like, why go looking for trouble? Why go looking and tempting fate? I don't understand it. I don't get involved in it too much. I talk a lot about it when I lecture. Agree with me or not. I'm just, I try to relay to people, whether it just be John Q. Public or I might have a bunch of investigators in the audience that are trying to, get some pointers. It's like, you just got to be careful and ask yourself, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to help people, or am I doing this because I like the thrill of the hunt kind of thing? All right. I'm in this work to try and help people. If my phone isn't ringing, I'm happy. I'm not looking for cases, Matter of fact, I'm semi-retired now. I do a lot of lecturing because my portion of the society is to educate as much as I can. As I said, I'm learning every day. I can learn just as much as from you as you can probably learn from me. I'm learning for every day. I don't care whether you're doing this 50 years or 5 months. We can learn from one another and work together The paranormal community, as you put it, has become, excuse my French, a shit show. You got everybody, with their egos vying for who wants to be on top of the Google search engine. And like, that's not what this is supposed to be about, people. And I see it going on all around me. I've been a victim myself of people that are jealous and they hold a lot of animosity towards me, my colleagues. And I just sit back and I shake my head. I go, why? I mean, all we want to do at the end of the day is bring some peace and love and understanding to someone that feels like they have an issue when maybe they never really had an issue. And just try to help them understand what may or may not be going on in their life or in their home or their place of business. You can have a psychological issue and have a paranormal issue. You know, Today it's like, oh, they're crazy or oh, they're schizophrenic or whatever. Well, how do you know that unless you're tested for it? One of the things that we tell people is you need to have a full physical and psychological workup. I just had something come through across my desk about 2-3 weeks ago, and I spoke to the woman on the phone. I also had one of my investigators talk to them on the phone, and they reported back to me and said, in asking these questions, um, this person claimed that they were being physically grabbed, and the we were talking to the significant other. I'm not sure if they were married or not, but she's like, "Well, he's claiming this, this, and this, and this." I'm like, "Well, what are you experiencing, dear? Do you see any marks on his body? Okay, any bruising, any scratching? No, no. All the answers are no." I said, "Well, has this person had sought professional help?" No, they haven't. I said, well, here's my recommendation. Go seek that professional help and then, and then we'll go from there. Or they'll say things in other cases. A woman was saying, a lot of stuff happens around the house. She has a lot of what we call vexations, or, you may call it infestation. But it always starts out slow with like a vexation, like an annoyance. But then she's like, well, it only happens when my 13-year-old grandson is here. Okay. Start asking some more questions. She's just weaning herself off a drug addiction, which I commended her for. But now we've got an issue where there were drugs involved, drug addictions. All right. Now you've got a pubescent teenager in the house, and you're claiming things are happening. But she had no authoritative, tangible proof. Okay. No audio recordings, no video recordings. Just her and her grandson said that they would witness this stuff. So I said, well, do you have any cameras in the home, like Ring cameras, things like that could catch things? And she said, no. I said, well, can you get some? Maybe you can go on Marketplace and get them secondhand if you can't afford them. I said, but, it needs to be documented. I said, did you write all this stuff down? The who, what, when, where, all that kind of stuff. Write the stuff down. Keep a journal. You don't have to write a book, but if something that you feel is paranormal happens, write it down. What time of day was it? Who was present? Who witnessed it? Because you want to, when I look at those notes, I want to see if there's a pattern. Okay. Well, if you're telling me you only have activity when your 13-year-old grandson is there, okay, well, now we got to look at that. Now that's very difficult because now you have a minor involved. And you got to be very careful when it comes to that. Now you need parental consent. Well, I found out that the kid's mother is actually in prison. So these are things you don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. I gave him the best advice I can. My gut feeling was that they weren't going to do anything. They were going to move on to the next person. A lot of these people, they'll go from person to person like me or you, or from group to group until they find someone that's going to buy into their story. Okay. And you're going to find a group that wants to grab the mystery machine and throw Scooby-Doo in the truck and go out there with all their equipment when they really aren't prepared or trained properly to do that. It's like, yay, like in Ghostbusters, we got one. And they all come down the fire pole. That's not the way people should be looking at this.
I agree.
Take it from an old guy that's been doing this a long time, whether you agree with me or not, but I was once where a lot of folks are. I was that person that got all excited. But, as you get more and more experience under your belt and you get cases where I've cried with people, I've laughed with people, I've brought a lot of relief to people and said, look, you got nothing going on here. This is what I found. This picture in the window. I was one case where this woman got an image in the window when she took a photo. I said, that's your reflection. And I proved it when I loaded it into my computer and I blew it up. I said, this is you. And she was so relieved. And she's like, oh my God, Joe, I've wasted your time. I said, wait a minute. Do you feel better? And she goes, I'm so relieved. This is a single mother that had an 8-year-old daughter. She was terrified because she scared the bejesus out of herself. I said, if I could bring some peace and comfort to you and you're relieved, then I've done my job. So don't ever look at it as if you're wasting my time. When I walked in here, you were terrified. I'm walking out and you're relieved and you've got a tangible, natural explanation for what you were experiencing. And I would follow up. This is years ago, but I would follow up with her every few weeks. And she's like, everything's gone. Nothing's happening. I'm like, it was psychosomatic. When people get it in their head that they have an issue, yeah. I mean, the mind is a very powerful thing. It's what we call self-manifestation. You start manifesting these things that they're really not happening. Because I'll talk to a spouse or another family member, I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about, or I don't know what she's talking about. I've lived here too, and I haven't experienced anything. It doesn't, so there's so many different avenues you can take with these cases. It all depends on what they claim is happening, what their true intentions are. It's all about, free will and intention. What are your intentions here? If you are cool with it and you really want a spirit to be there, then you're going to make one up and you're going to self-manifest that. It's I get frustrated sometimes because people that I talk to, a lot of them want to have a spirit. And I'm like, well, why would you want something to be here? I said, well, I want it to be my mother or my grandmother. That brings comfort to me. I said, they're with you. I said, you know what tells me that? My faith. They're with you. Talk to them. And I remember with my wife lost her parents very young. Her parents were 50 and 51 respectively, and they passed about a year and a half apart. And with my wife to this day, when she sees a rainbow, she interprets that as a sign from them. And I remember Ed said to my wife one day, sitting at my kitchen table right here in this very home, he said, Laurel, if you believe every time you see a rainbow that's a sign from your parents, your grandparents, then it is. Because who's going to say it's not? I mean, who wants to be that asshole that says, oh, you're crazy? No,
Right.
I'm not trying to be funny, but if that brings comfort to her or anybody that says, with some people it's butterflies, with some people it's dragonflies, others it may be a bird species, a blue jay, a robin, an oriole. If you take that as a sign from a loved one from the other side, it says, hey, things may not be okay today, but tomorrow's going to be a better day. I got your back. I'm here. I'm always with you. But that's your faith that tells you that. And the people that have faith don't really need to see these things. It's all in the interpretation, but it could go the other way too. People that want to see these demonic things and they want to hear growling, they're going to hear it. They're going to have a recording of nothing but static. Oh, did you hear that? Did you hear that growl? Well, no. I'm sorry. I'm just not hearing. I'm not making fun of you. I'm not hearing what you're hearing because they want it to be so bad that it's in their mind. And you're trying to talk sense into people. Some people will listen to you and other people will say, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay.
Okay. All right. So Rob's second question is, and this one's to you, Joe, you specifically. It says, Joe, can you help us understand the difference between a Ouija board and simply asking questions?
In my opinion, there is no difference. A Ouija board is just a physical instrument. Okay. So you can set a seance. You have a seance. You're opening doors. You're opening yourself up. Okay. Using a Ouija board, in my experience, and take it from me, folks, is dangerous. All right. But you don't need the board. It's just a piece of cardboard made by what? Parker Brothers. Okay. You don't need a Ouija board to have the same effect. So there really isn't a difference. If you're opening yourself up and you're sitting in a room alone or with other people and you start asking questions of the spirit world, you're opening that door. You don't know what's going to come through. You may get an answer to a question that you either expected or didn't expect. You might think it's coming from a past loved one or a past resident of the home. But my guess is it's not. It's probably coming from something more sinister that's trying to lead you on. All right. So whether you have the actual board or not, in my opinion, matters not. It's all about the intention. Okay. If you're using a Ouija board, well, what could your possible intentions be? You're looking to contact someone from the other side. Look at the case I talk about, the movie The Exorcist. The movie The Exorcist was based on a true story of a 14-year-old boy who used the Ouija board with his aunt, who was a spiritualist, and her instrument of choice to communicate with the other side was the Ouija board. So she had this great idea. Well, let's just drag my 14-year-old nephew into this. Well, eventually his aunt passed away. He was devastated. Well, what did he do? He continued to use the Ouija board to try to communicate with her. And if you believe it, it turned into a full-blown possession case. I believe it's possible. I've seen it. Okay. Now, if they just sat there having a seance or having a discussion without the Ouija board, could it still happen? Absolutely. In my opinion, absolutely. Okay. The board is just an instrument. It could be tarot cards. It could be anything. And I know, I get people that get mad at me. Oh, I use tarot cards. I said, well, they can be very dangerous. Any form of divination, any instrument that you're using to try to find information about the future. I asked this question to my audience. If you were given the opportunity to know the exact date and time and manner of your own death, would you want that information? All right, God knows that information. He knows everything we're going to do before we're even born. But he gives us the free will to make those choices. And if you make the wrong choices, like they say, FAFO, I won't say it, but it's like, if you mess with this stuff, you're going to find out. But yeah, no, in my opinion, I don't think you need to actually have the physical Ouija board to open up those doorways. Asking questions, I know it's like, well, what's the harm in asking certain questions? Well, because you're having a conversation with the unknown and you're opening yourself up to it. And if it's something sinister, something with, evil intentions, it's going to give you the answers that it wants to string you along. Because it's trying to gain your trust and draw you in. I've had people say, oh, don't worry, Joe. It's just the spirit of a little girl that died here years ago. And I said, how do you know that? How do you know it's not? Well, we don't know. That's just it. We don't know for sure. We can assume, but you know what happens when you assume?
You make an ass out of you and me.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, it can be very dangerous. And that's what I was taught. It's very difficult. What I'll do is, if I want to leave a recorder going in a room, I'll just leave it and leave the room and let it just play. The best piece of equipment I have, it's an old Sony magnetic tape recorder. It's probably 30 some odd years old, but I still use it to this day. And you just leave it in a room or leave it in the home and just let it play. Leave the house. Go out and have dinner and come back in a few hours or whatever. And then play it back and see if you got any messages, if anything comes through. Most of the time, you're just going to get static, but it's just, I don't want people getting upset about what I'm saying, but I'm just telling you, it's not safe to do this, to open yourself up like this. Now, I'm not saying that if you do play with a Ouija board, you're going to have a problem, but why roll the dice? Why spin the wheel and take a chance? because if you do have a problem, you get an attachment. And there's a difference between an attachment is on the outside and a full-blown possession, which is when something physically takes over your body. There's a big difference there. Possession is very rare. Demonic activity is rare, but possession is very rare. TV, Hollywood, YouTube would want you to believe that, possession happens all the time. Well, it doesn't, in my opinion. I've had people say, Joe, I'm possessed, or Joe, my husband or my wife is possessed. I'm like, first of all, if you're possessed, you wouldn't know it. The word demonic and possession and terms like that, in my opinion, these days are thrown around very loosely. And you really need to take the time to study, demonology, which is basically just the study of demons and their hierarchy and how they operate, and things like that. And, it could be very dangerous. And I just caution people that do this work. And there's a lot of good people out there doing good work. Just protect yourself, because if you can't protect yourself, you certainly can't protect the people you're trying to help.
Right.
Sorry, I get long-winded. It's just this is my life. This has been my life for 40 years, and I care about each and everybody out there. The people that want to do the work, I care about them.
You just make my job easier, Joe. That's all you do. So, but yeah, I'm big on protection too. Obviously, especially with my gifts, and like you said, I consider my gifts for God. I mean, I tell people all the time, my gifts are for God, and God don't make mistakes. So He wants me to use my gifts to help people. So how's that evil? So yeah, and so I believe protection is very important. We do a prayer of protection before we go in, and we do a prayer of detachment before we leave. Because safety first always. And and I know you know this, and most of my viewers know this, just from previous conversations and everything. But I'm also a very educated investigator. Obviously, I'm experienced. I've been doing this for 35 years. But I also, when I decided this is what I was going to do, I decided I wanted to be able to have every advantage I could. So I actually have a degree in parapsychology. I have 2 degrees in theology, and I took demonology training through Bishop Long. So because it's like Wade said on a previous episode, education in this field is important. Always seek education and always keep learning. So it's important. My first ever experience with a Ouija board, I'm not a big Ouija board person, because I know people use them and they don't ever have attached. So if they know how to use them, more power to them. But there's no reason to open up for me. There's no reason for me to open up that possibility. So, but my first ever experience with a Ouija board is actually kind of an embarrassing, funny story. I was 13 again, and I did the church thing. And back when I was 13, I was actually a good-looking guy. I don't know what happened to me, but I was a good-looking guy.
Stop! I tell people I got a face for radio.
Yeah, that's what I tell people all the time, and that's just like the Scare Network is actually going to start streaming my podcast. I'm like, I got a radio face. Why do you want to put me? But anyway, so my youth leader's adopted daughter, she was into. Nowadays we would call her a goth. Back in 1987, you didn't have that term. They would just. But she was into all that. But she was hot. She was turning 16. And she was hot. I mean, she really looked like Alyssa Milano back in those days. So, and I was the only boy that she invited to her birthday party, to her 16th birthday party. So, of course, I said yes. And, but that was what we did at the birthday party. We used the Ouija board. Yeah. And I didn't really have any experience with the Ouija board, maybe a little bit. But then we played another game. It was designed to designed to open up doors and stuff. And that game scared me even back then. And I've never wanted to do anything like that again. The name of the game was 13 Doors and 13 Staircases. I don't remember a lot about it except for everybody laid like head to head, and then you like try to communicate, try to open doors. The door that was open for me was not a good one, and after that, I decided I was done. But anyway, so that's my Ouija board story. But I think it's important, to people have to understand that you can't go into an investigation without protection, because like you said, you'll get an attachment and something you don't want. We actually, my team, or part of my team, we actually recently investigated Waverly Hills Sanatorium, and Catherine, or we call her Cat. She's my case manager, so she's like my assistant. She didn't listen to me about protection, and she actually got an attachment for like weeks. I was having to help her, guide her in how to get rid of this attachment. She now knows that protection is very important.
Well, it is. And, I get a lot of people, when I do Paracons and I have a table, people come up and talk to me, and I do talk to them about protection. And people are like, well, Joe, if I get this holy water or this rosary or crucifix, will this protect me? I said, only if you have faith in it. You need to believe in these objects. Otherwise, they're just inanimate objects. They have no power at all. I mean, I have my blessed crucifix that I wear around my neck all the time, but it's nothing but a piece of wood and piece of metal, unless I have the faith in what this symbolizes and the power behind it. So that's my answer to people when they ask me, what's my best protection? I said, your faith. You got to have faith in something.
Right. Exactly.
It's like they said, there's no atheist in foxholes. Well, there's no atheist in haunted houses either, but in my opinion, and I say that a lot, but it is my opinion, and I don't push my opinion and my beliefs on anybody. But if I'm asked the question, I'm going to give you the best answer I can based on my knowledge and experience. It may not be the right answer. It may not be the answer you're looking for. But, I just feel that there's a lot of people doing this work today that are not properly protected. And as I said before, you could become a victim yourself. You're there and you're honestly trying to help somebody. You might have the best intentions, you want to help somebody, but if you're not protected yourself and you don't know how to protect your client, then you can make a situation much worse than it is.
You can. So let me ask you this question, Joe. This is a question I ask the guests that I respect, and I want to get their views on. So, because we've kind of talked a little bit around the YouTubers and stuff. So, but the question is, what do you feel? How do you think the parapop culture? That's my word, parapop culture. So that's the TV shows, the podcasters. So I guess I'm part of that. The YouTubers, all that. How do you think the parapop culture has affected the paranormal field, both positively and negatively?
Well, I look at what you consider parapop culture. I look at it as more entertainment. I wish that some of the some of these YouTubers I think are funny. I think some of them do some pretty good work. I'm not knocking them. I'm just like, but let your audience know, or your viewers know, that this is for educational purposes or for entertainment purposes. It's not written in stone that this is the gospel truth. There's a lot of good people out there doing good work, trying to document things. But as I said before, they may not be properly protected. And then you have a whole nother culture. I guess you guys call them debunkers. And, and then it turns into a shit show. And you got people fighting, throwing insults, making threats. That's where I just sit there and shake my head and go, what the hell's going on here? I mean, it could be positive in the sense that we lift each other up, we offer each other assistance. He said, I don't know everything. If I get stumped on something, I'm going to reach out to one of my good friends or colleagues and say, what do you think? Let me run something by you. I'm a little stumped here because my mentors are gone now. you know um so that it could be positive if you work together. That people call it para unity. I mean, we should be unified, all of us. We shouldn't be competing against one another. But that's where you get into the negative thing, is because you have a lot of people that have egos. And people, they mock what they don't understand. Or they see that somebody's getting more attention, or someone's got a YouTube channel or TikTok or whatever they call it these days. Someone has a TV show. I've been offered TV shows and I've turned them all down. I say, I appreciate you thinking of me, but that's not why I do this. I don't want to be on TV. Like I said, I have a face for radio. I don't want to be on television. I want people to know who I am. I want people to know about the Warren Society, because if there are people out there that need help, that really need help, we want them to know that we're here for them. And it's not just us. There's a lot of good people. I'm going to be, going to the main Paracon. There's a lot of good people that are going to be there that are doing this for the right reasons. I don't name names. I don't name and shame. None of that stuff. I get along with everybody. But if people come up to my table and ask me questions, I'm going to give you the best answer I can. We may not agree, but look, I respect your right to disagree with me. I'm not going to get mad at you. I'm not going to debate you. I'm not going to, get in an argument with you. If you don't believe in what I'm saying, that's fine. I respect your opinion, but you should respect mine. And if more people would think that way, you wouldn't have this fighting going on and arguing. And I see it out there. Not much gets by me. I see it. I keep quiet about it. But I just shake my head. I said, when I started this work back in 1986, I was a teenager, fresh out of high school. I didn't know my ass from my elbow. And in some cases, I probably still don't, you know. But this to me was a vocation. It's not an occupation. I don't charge to do this work. I do get paid a fee if I do a lecture, or if I have a class or something. I mean, because I got to keep the lights on too. Let's face it. I'm retired now. I did my 30 years working for a corporation. So in my retirement, I spend a lot of time educating. I'm working on my life story, my book. I'm hoping to have it done by the end of the year if I can. But there's a lot to put in there, and I want to make it entertaining, of course, because I'm a big dumb animal. I got a sense of humor like everybody else. Not everybody understands my sense of humor, but when it's time to be serious, when you're talking about a serious subject, or if I'm talking about a case that was very serious, I want people to know, okay, all kidding aside, folks, let me show you a video on something. I've got video footage, of audio footage of cases I've worked on, and I use them for educational purposes. One of my themes this year, I do a lot of public library speaking. I talk about, Hollywood versus, Hollywood movies, paranormal fact versus fiction. I concentrate on movies like Annabelle and Amityville and The Haunting in Connecticut. Those that were real paranormal cases that turned into theatrical movies. And I talk about, okay, The Exorcist, her head didn't spin around. That would have killed the kid. That's Hollywood. That's all done for shock value. The pea soup, the vomit. Could that happen? Yes. These demonic things can make things materialize. The movie The Rite is one of my favorites, but a movie that was made about Father Gary Thomas. I talked to Father Gary Thomas one day many years ago when the movie came out, about 13 years ago, and I asked him about the exorcism where the nails, these 2-inch nails, materialized from this young girl's mouth. Okay, and I asked him about it, and he said, "Joe, I still have the nails." This stuff really does happen. It's very rare, but it does happen. Now, if your average person was to witness something like that, they'd probably soil themselves
Yep.
and run the other way, because yeah, it's cool to watch it on TV, but people need to understand this really does happen in the real world. It's not every day. It's not as rampant and as common as maybe Hollywood wants you to believe. You gotta understand, when you're sitting in a movie theater watching a movie, that movie was made to put butts in the seats and to make money. So you can't believe when someone says it's based on a true story, and I used air quotes, you can pretty much be assured that it's very loosely based. And
Yeah.
I sit there scratching my head and like, I know this case. I may not have worked on it, but it might have been a case that my mentors worked on that I heard about, and I know the truth behind it. If you just tell the true story of how it really actually happened, it's far more terrifying than, but Hollywood, once they sink their talons into a story, like, some of these cases we just talked about, they take a lot of liberties, and I know why they do it. It's to scare you. I mean, look at the whole Annabelle story. Well, I get asked all the question, well, why didn't they use the real Annabelle doll or a real,
Again.
Raggedy Ann doll? Well, first of all, there's trademark issues, I'm sure, legal issues, but because the Raggedy Ann doll is cute. I have an exact replica down in my Halloween room downstairs, but it's not scary. They had to make a doll that was scary, and I get it. I get it. But when you're talking about the real case, it's far more terrifying to hear the story about what really happened surrounding this doll. And it's not the doll itself; what was manifested through the doll by those conjuring things. The nurses that owned the doll used to have seances around this doll. They treated it as if it was human. They would sit at the breakfast table. They would buy jewelry and dresses and clothes for it. And now you're asking for trouble. And then to think, well, there's a spirit of a little girl that died. No, no, no. In my humble opinion, God would not allow a human spirit to inhabit an inanimate object. It doesn't happen that way. If this doll really did walk and stand, then there was something demonically attached to it.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so it is terrifying. But just to come and look at the doll and see the doll, that's a great experience for people because you're not going to have that opportunity very often. But don't be afraid that thing's going to jump out of the glass and choke you.
I'm going to get to see it at Rock Island.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm looking forward to it. It's kind of a bittersweet thing to me because Dan was such a good friend of mine, and now I'm not going to get to see Dan, but I still want to see the doll. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it was actually going to be the first time. It was actually going to be the first time I met Dan face to face. We talked on the phone like every week, but I never actually got to meet him yet because I live way down here and everybody else lives up there. So, but yeah, so yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the fact that Sarah, she was on her earlier. She said when she was on the show last time that her opinion of what causes the drama that we see in the paranormal field nowadays is just what you said. It's the ego. For some reason, there's some people who thinks that they should be up here on the totem pole, and they're not. And it should be about that. Like you said, it should be about helping each other out. I actually have a friend in the field that actually does the TV shows and all that stuff, and he actually said, it's been about 2 years ago now, he actually made the statement that para-unity is dead and it was never actually real. And but it should be. It should be about helping each other out. So to me, the para-pop culture, the positive to it is that thanks to your ghost hunters and your ghost adventurers and your ghost brothers and your ghost whatever, it's now you can now talk about it more, especially down here where I'm at. So now I still get some of the, oh, you're going to hell. I still get some of that, but I get some of the, oh, you mean like ghost hunters or stuff, and I still get, I got this going on in my house. You want to come over? So it's opened up that communication. But the bad in it, like you said, people have egos, and you got these people running around screaming everything's a demon. And like you said, demons are where you're talking about less than 1% of all paranormal cases are demonic. They may be malicious. You may have a malicious case, but to have a demonic case is very rare. So, but you have these people on YouTube where it happens every week, every time they're somewhere. So yeah, so that makes it harder on the ones that are out there doing it the right way for the real reasons.
And I will add this. You know what, Kent? The Warrens were very special to me. My wife and I knew them. My wife and I were just newly dating when we met them. And, I'm very saddened to hear a lot of the negativity around the Warrens because, first of all, they're past and they can't defend themselves. All right. I knew them intimately. I knew them as people. Forget about the world famous ghost hunters. We knew them as people. And the people that talk a lot of dirt about the Warrens never met them. Everyone's entitled to your opinion. I respect that. Whether I agree with you or not, you're entitled to it, but make it an informed opinion. All right. What I don't like and what I don't care for is people that talk crap about other people, whether it be jealousy or, ego or whatever. We should all be working together. I love everybody. I don't have a problem with anybody. And I don't think anybody has a problem. I hope they don't, but look, anybody needs my help, I'd be happy to help anybody. If I can answer their question, whatever. But in return, if I need help on a case that may be out in Oklahoma and there's a group out there that may be knowledgeable of it, I want to be able to say, I could send this group a message and ask them, for some help or information. And most people would be like, yeah, no problem, Joe. What do you need? But you do have some people out there, groups that, and I don't know, I don't have anybody in particular in mind, but like, oh, this is our case. We're not sharing any information with you. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm just, these people contacted me. I'm trying to help them. They said you were at their home. Well, this is our case. And, I'm not sharing any pictures or videos. I've had that happen. I'm like, well, if your true intention was to help these people and you couldn't, and maybe I can, I'm just asking for some help here. Can you share what information you gathered while you were there? It's very rare that people don't want to cooperate, but I've had to put up with egos. I'm like, I know it was I don't care about your being possessive of your case. Obviously, it's not your case anymore. If you couldn't help them and now they're reaching out to me or one of my colleagues or reaching out to the Warren Society, I'm just looking for a little assistance here, and maybe we can work together on it. I don't like what I see going on around me. And look, I'm not stupid. I don't engage in it, but I just wish we could all just get along. And there's no reason why we can't all work together for a common goal, unless you have ulterior motives.
Exactly. There was a team, and I'm not going to mention the names because it's not worth my energy. But I was one of the I was the featured vendor down at Smoky Mountain Terror, down in the Rockies. Down in the Smokies, the big convention. And we had this YouTube group who thinks more of themselves than they should. They were charging $60 for a picture. Not even an autograph picture, Joe. Just an 8x10 picture. $60. That's what's wrong with the field now. And then we have this other group that I don't even like wasting my breath on. But because of this other group, when you go to places like South Pittsburgh Hospital, Harriman Hospital, Octagon Hall, places like that, you can no longer release video or go live until the location approves your video, because they were running around screaming everything was a demon. That's the problem.
Yeah, and I know why people do it, because it gets views, it gets likes. I tell people, I'm like, if you really had a demonic case, you would know it and you wouldn't want anything to do with it.
Right.
I have people, I got scratched by a demon. I went to this house and, I came face to face with a demon. I'm sitting there chuckling to myself. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
You would be you would be dead probably. Yeah, that's what I tell people all the time. I mean, I'm trained in demonology. So I'm educated. I'm trained. Do I want to find a demonic case? No. I want to be able to help in case I come across one, but I don't want to face one. In 35 years of doing this, I've only had 2 cases that I could even consider possibly, and I don't even consider them demonic. I consider them malicious, and but one maybe because the cause of the activity was the husband. It was one of my first residentials. It was in Indiana. It was back in the days when I was actually a pro MMA fighter. So I did an investigation, and the in-laws called us to come and investigate the house. What happened was it was a murder-suicide. The husband killed his kids, his wife, and then himself.
It's terrible.
It was very sad, very terrible. It still haunts me to this day. It's actually in my book, and so of course I got the police report and all that stuff. Research, like you said, you have to research. So the backstory was the husband lost his job at John Deere, and he fell into depression. He fell into depression, drug use, alcoholism, and then he started messing with devil worship. All this was actually in the police report. So we knew that going in. Well, the in-laws, the wife's parents, wanted us to give them some answers. Is what they wanted. Obviously, why wouldn't you? Well, the first thing to understand, this case was very fresh. It had probably only been 3 months since the murder-suicide. So it was still really fresh. So we went up there. We went up there and investigated. And getting to this house was like a thing from a Stephen King movie. So we had to go underneath the famous Crying Baby Bridge there in Indiana. The urban legend where the mother threw the baby over the bridge.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had to drive under that. And then when we got to the location, it was a side road, blah, blah, blah. Caddy cornered from the house was an abandoned 1820s cemetery. So it was just kind of odd. And the neighbor, I guess they decided to try to knock down the house. So they had taken a bulldozer and collapsed the house on top of each other.
Mm-hmm. So
we get in there, and we do an investigation. When we climb through the window, it was originally like the second floor window. It led us to the basement. So when we got in there and got to the bedroom, the first thing that we came to was the kitchen and the living room. Then when we got to the bedrooms, the kids' bedroom was first. The police tape was still there and stuff. And so, this case still bothers me if you can't tell. So there was still blood stain on the mattresses. So
that's tragic.
So it was. So luckily for using my gift, I was able to, have a communication with them, and the wife and the kids of the wife actually crossed over. So that was a good thing. And that's what the in-laws wanted. They just wanted to know that the daughter and the grandkids were at peace. That's what they wanted. But I was actually able to provide more evidence to the police, because when we got to the master bedroom, apparently the husband made the wife get on her knees, and he shot her head. Then he shot himself. So there was all that. Well, the police found a journal, a diary, whatever you want to call it. They found that in the dresser drawer where the husband had recorded, like the facts where he's like, I contacted this, blah, blah, where he was dabbling into stuff he probably shouldn't have been, especially since they already had the alcohol and the drug problem, because that's an opening anyway. So they already had that. But for some reason, I kept being drawn to the walk-in closet. So when I went to the walk-in closet, I noticed in the back corner, back right-hand corner, where the husband's clothes was, somebody had cut the carpet out with a X-Acto knife for box cutter. They had cut a square in the carpet. Not only in the carpet, but when I peeled back the carpet, it was also in the padding. So when I peeled back the padding, there was a pentagon in the closet. So I was able to provide all that to the people. It was probably one of the toughest cases I've ever investigated.
And it was the husband that was into the occult.
Yep.
So now you got, like you said, look at all the doorways you got there. You got drug and alcohol abuse, physical abuse, maybe sexual abuse. You got occult worship. I mean, none of those things are good.
No.
And innocent people paid with their lives. And I had a similar case in upstate New York some years ago, back in 2022, where the husband killed his wife and 5-year-old son and went after the 2-year-old. The 2-year-old survived. And we were called up there, and the case was still fresh. The husband hadn't even gone to trial yet. And the family wanted us to talk to him. And although I would have liked to, I said, look, this case isn't even going to trial yet. The prosecutor is not going to let me anywhere near this guy. And I didn't want to get involved in an ongoing murder investigation. But, my thoughts were that this guy, and he was a very loving husband and father, he just snapped and murdered his family and attempted murder. And the 2-year-old survived and is doing fine now, living with relatives. But when you think about the why would someone do this? We don't know. And I said, if he had some kind of demonic attachment or something, we're never going to know that. I never laid eyes on the man. I never, went to the prison and interviewed him or anything like that. But we may never know the answer. Is it just a tragic event that happened in the blink of an eye? And, 2 people lost their lives. They did cross over successfully as far as we know. And, that and your story are absolutely tragic because, that involves real people. And real people died tragically. And this isn't a Hollywood movie. Of course, this is the kind of stuff that Hollywood makes movies about. But in your case that you mentioned, we knew there was an occult practice. In my case, we tried to look for evidence of that, Santeria or voodoo or something involving the occult. But the house had been cleaned out pretty much. A lot of the furniture and children's toys had been moved to the garage. We're all stacked in the garage. So if there was any kind of ritualistic stuff, we didn't find any evidence of that. But could there have been? Yeah. I mean, there could have been. But this was a very devout family. We actually found in the kitchen was a copy of the family Bible. And the family, as I was told by their relatives, would go to church together and pray together, and all of a sudden, just for some reason after dinner, the guy just snapped and killed his wife and child. And probably never know the answer why. I mean, in his defense, they said that he blacked out and doesn't remember doing it. He actually called the police on himself and said, "I think I just killed my family." It's bizarre. It's bizarre, and it's not every day you run into a case like that. I think that's the only murder case that I that was recent that I was involved in, and it was heartbreaking. It was just heartbreaking. But when we went to the house, there was still blood evidence because I actually asked the family. I said, "Who cleaned up the blood and everything?" And they said, "Well, we did. The family did." After they were done with their investigation and given the green light, but they missed some of it, and we saw evidence of it. And that, as a husband and father myself, that was very emotional for all of us. my team that was there, and Father Ken was with us from California. The case was in upstate New York, and said prayers and mass in the home to because the family was afraid that there was a demon in the house that
Right.
caused this, and that just wasn't the case. But they were afraid that, look, we want to either rent or maybe sell this house. We want to make sure that the next renter or buyer of the home is not subjected to something, and that just wasn't the case. Fortunately, it wasn't the home, but unfortunately, this kind of stuff happens. It's tragic. It's terrible. Look what just happened in the news in Minneapolis, and why people do these things, we may never know unless they leave a note behind or something. But it's a part of life, and it's tragic. I don't know what else to say about it.
I mean, there's not really much to say. I do. I am going to let you off here soon, but I do want to touch base on something you touched base on just a few minutes ago, and that's the Warrens. And for some reason, we have a loud minority, and I say it's a minority, but they're very vocal. That for some reason have decided to target the Warrens as whatever. And I personally say, I never actually had the privilege of meeting them, but through the books, especially Ed's books, because when Ed wrote his books, he put himself in there. So I actually felt like I knew him. And 13-year-old me, 14-year-old me, that was my lifeline. And so I don't get the hate. I don't we like you said, they're dead, so we shouldn't even. There definitely should be in hate, but just from a paranormal investigator standpoint, we should be thankful for what they did do for the field. And so,
well, if it wasn't for them, I certainly wouldn't be here today. And here I am 40 years later, and I'm still involved in the work. But look, people can have an opinion, as I said, and I respect that. I mean, everyone's entitled to their opinion. However, I would just ask that you have an open mind and make it an informed opinion. Don't say, "Well, I read online or I saw on the internet, I saw this article or whatever." Well, that doesn't mean that it's true. I've heard a lot of stuff about Ed and Lorraine that disturbs me. That is not true. At least I can speak intelligently of the character of the people that I grew up with. You know, if something that was said about them negatively was true, I don't know it to be true. And it bothers me and it bothers my wife because we love them as we were close to them, and it hurts me. I know it hurts the family to hear all this stuff. I don't engage in social media fights. I tell people don't do that because nobody wins those arguments. Somebody says something and somebody jumps to their defense, and then their friends jump in and your friends jump in, and you all look like idiots if you ask me. You see this arguing, and you make it a public fight. It's like, why don't you just go on Dr. Phil and just, I don't know why people want to air their dirty laundry out on social media. If I have a problem with someone or something somebody said, and I have in the past, I'll send them a private message and say, what would possess you to say something like that? If you want to know something about Ed and Lorraine Warren, here's my phone number. Call me. Reach out to me, and I'll answer any question that I possibly can. I'm sure that the family doesn't appreciate that their loved one's name being dragged through the mud. I just wish I heard a debunker say, and I won't mention who it is, but this is someone that said, "Oh, I don't believe in ghosts and I don't believe in demons." I'm like, well, then you can't offer an opinion. All I ask is that you have an open mind that this stuff is possible. I know it is because I've lived it.
right.
But if you're going to sit there and say, "Oh, I don't believe in ghosts, I don't believe in demons, they don't exist," I'm like, well, okay, you can believe that, but don't be poo-pooing the people that do believe it.
Right.
But it's all for show. It's all for entertainment or for likes or monetary. I mean, obviously, if you got a YouTube channel, and you're making money off of it, depending on how many views you get. I don't know how this works. I'm an old guy now. I don't have a YouTube channel. I'm not planning on having one. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not trying to offend anybody that has a channel. I watch a lot of them. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, And some of them, like, wow, they might have captured something there. I don't know. I don't know. You just see this, couple of second or couple of minute clip of something, but I wasn't there. So I'm not going to judge, but when people start bad mouthing other people, well, forget about Ed and Lorraine Warren. It could be anybody. They could be bad mouthing you or me or anybody. No one has the right to do that. And that just festers hate, and that means the devil's winning.
Right.
So
Right.
you can't be in this work for the right reasons if you're talking shit about other people. All right. If you embody the 7 deadly sins, then you can't help anybody. And the deadliest of those, in my opinion, is pride. It's ego. And that, that's my 2 cents on that. But you need to look in the mirror. My dad used to tell me, God rest his soul. He's like, you got 2 things going for you. That's your name and your integrity. And neither one of them are for sale. Okay? He goes, I got to wake up every morning, look myself in the mirror, and I got to like what I see. Okay? If you can do that, then God bless you. That's great. But if you look in the mirror, like, what was it, Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. You got to be true to yourself. And if you can be true to yourself and you can like what you see, then you're doing good. But these haters out there, these people that have jealousy and animosity towards others for whatever reason, I don't like that. I don't think it's necessary. I think that we could all help one another. We could all learn from one another. I try to be as middle of the road as possible. Yeah. Do I have opinions on things? Yeah. But I'm smart enough to keep them to myself.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I am too.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with anybody until they make me have a problem. So like there is one duo, I can't even call them a team. There's one duo that has personally affected my investigations and other people's investigations. So since they've made it personal, I have a problem with them. But I don't mention the names. Only thing I will say is only thing I'll say is my friends from Scotland calls them they call them the Spice Girls of the paranormal field. And so that's all I'll say on that. But yeah, we did. So when I tell people, you'll probably agree with me on this, Joe, because let's be honest, mine and your philosophies are so much alike. I mean, it seems like we've known each other for years, even though, I mean, that's how I feel. But to me, people ask me all the time, what's the difference between the field 35 years ago and the field now? And what I tell them is back when I first got into this, back when I did my first investigation, the only thing I had was a flashlight, a old-fashioned tape recorder, like you said, and a notebook and a pencil. That's all I had. And so back in those days, everybody in the field worked together. Everybody's goal was to make the field better and to help people. And nowadays, you have people worried about likes and ego and that kind of stuff. And to me, that's the main difference. And we need to get back to that, back to the way it used to be. My goal in the field is I want to leave the field better than it was when I die, because I'm going to keep doing this till I die. Let's be serious. So when I die, I want to leave the field a better place than it was when I started. That's my goal. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's obviously the things were not the same as they were 35, 40 years ago. I mean, things change, technology changes, social media. I mean, we didn't have social media back in '86. I don't think the internet came out till '96, but and it's got good and bad, pros and cons, but you have all the equipment, your so-called ghost hunting equipment. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not trying to insult anybody. You got people that make this stuff, that sell this stuff. That's fine. I just don't need it. I've never needed it. I've got a good friend of mine that buys a lot of this stuff and he tests it out. So well, look, I'll give anything a try. I mean, I'm not saying that this stuff doesn't work. The cat ball stuff. My friends know, oh, Joe's going to get off on a tangent on the cat balls. I'm like, no, I love cat balls. I'm going to get about 100 of them and put them on my Christmas tree. So every time I walk by, they all go up. This is, if you enjoy doing this and using these things, I'm not going to rain on your parade. I'm trying to, educate people on the dangers and misconceptions of what can happen, by getting involved in this stuff.
Right.
And it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, no. And that's like just the terms people use. We have some people who are like, I'm a ghost hunter, whatever. I'm not a ghost hunter. I don't have ghost heads hanging on my wall. I'm not going to hunt a ghost. I'm a paranormal researcher. I'm going to research. I'm going to help. So, but yeah, I think it's important everybody realizes that like you said, it's not all rainbows and sunshine. There is a danger in the field, especially residential cases, because you don't know what you're getting into. You don't know.
Right, but not only that, Ken, but you have a family in the balance here. You've got a family or a person or a couple that reach out to you as a so-called expert. They're looking to you for help, for guidance, to, hey, say, Joe, what's going on here? Am I crazy? I'm scared. I got little kids to worry about. I'm not a ghost hunter. I'm a ghost helper. That's the way I say it. But if you're dealing with real people in their home, and you can do more damage if you don't really know what you're doing and you're giving them advice based on what, you could be caught. You're dealing with people's lives and their emotions. If you're telling somebody, oh yeah, it's your grandmother coming through with a message, well, you better be damn sure it is. Because, or if you tell, even worse, if you tell somebody, and I've dealt with this a lot, well, you have a portal in your home and there's demons coming through it and all this. Now you're scared. This is your castle. This is your home. You're telling people you got demons in your home, and I'll go out there and say, well, I had ABC Paranormal here and they said I had a demon here. And now I've got to try to put the shit back in the horse and say, and pull them and talk them off the ledge and say, listen, you don't have a demon here. And well, why would they say so? I don't know. I can't speak for them, but obviously they don't know what they're talking about. Because you don't just say it. Even if you felt the presence there, you want to be careful what you say to the family, because you eventually have to leave and go home. And you might live around the corner, down the street, or 6 states away. Eventually you're going to go do what you can do for the family, and then you go home. And if you stir the hornet's nest and you make things worse, that family's got to be left to deal with that. So you got to be very careful what you tell people.
Yeah, we have a team here, and I'm not going to mention the names because it's not with it, but we have a team here in southeast Missouri, which is, like an hour and a half from here. So we're in the same area. We're in the heartland. So I used to work with them quite a bit at the beginning, but they're one of these teams that their whole goal and being a paranormal is to get a TV show. They even have customized the amulets with like the logo and all this stuff. Well, so there's a haunted location here in the same town that they're from in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. It's got a big haunted history. I've investigated a couple times. Had good investigations there. Grant Wilson even investigated, when he was in charge of TAPS, the season that he was over. So, I mean, it's a known haunted. Well, when we got there, the first time that we investigated, they had got to the point that you couldn't investigate the location unless a staff from the museum, it operates as a museum now, unless the staff from the museum was there with you. When we got there, and the first thing they said to me was, "Oh, you're Kent." They're like, we've already had 7 people call and tell us how good that you're legitimate. So we'll just show you around and then we'll leave it. And as they're showing us around, they're like, the reason we don't allow people to investigate on their own anymore, besides you, is because this semi-famous team came in here and was yelling at everything and provoking and stuff. And she's like, I hate it because, they're like, they got all the cool gadgets. So the young kids, latch onto them. Well, so that was just a little bit of background for them. So the thing that they did that made me, I have nothing to do with them anymore. They traveled all the way to Memphis, Tennessee to do this residential investigation where they told this 85-year-old lady, they told her that she had 5 portals and 3 demons. And they couldn't close the portals and they couldn't do anything with the demons.
That's pretty irresponsible.
The only way I found out about this is the lady was watching my podcast and she made a comment, about it. And I told the lady, I'm like, contact me after the show. So I was able to provide her with legitimate help. I got a team that I knew in Memphis that I knew was legitimate. So I got them to help her. And yeah, that's irresponsible. That's doing more harm than good. Yeah.
Well, some of the television shows in the past are very good. They're very well done. And some of them are very educational and informative. I'm certainly not knocking them all. But if your goal is to just be on TV, chances are you're not in this for the right reasons.
Right.
I don't know why everybody wants, the TV shows, I think the paranormal world, every angle has just about been broached on television. Just about every network has had a paranormal show. And like I said, I've watched them. Some of them I enjoy. Some I think are done. Some of them I sit there and go, wow, they got a good point there. They got some evidence there. That's fine. But, for the new up and coming investigators that just watch TV and think they're going to get their training from TV, that's probably not the best way to get your training. People ask me, well, Joe, I really want to get in this field. I want to help people. How do I get started? I said, well, it's not easy because I said, what you want to do is find a well-respected person or group that is willing to mentor you. I was lucky. I was chosen. I was chosen to be one of the Warren students back in the day. And, I learned their ways. And obviously I formulated my own opinions through the years. Did I agree with everything? No. No one agrees with everything, but I learned from experience, but there's a lot's changed since then. Times are different. Times are different and times have changed in just the last 10 years. But it doesn't mean that everything you see on YouTube or TikTok or television is bad or misleading. You just got to know, you got to be able to discern between the good ones and the bad ones.
Right.
I don't get myself in trouble with people say, because I had people say, hey, I was on a show. It was really good. Well, yeah, maybe it was. I'm not saying it wasn't, but I've seen just as equal number of terrible ones too. And I sit there and my wife will be like, who are you yelling at? And I'm like, look at these idiots on TV. Hey, in the privacy of my own home, I can do that. And I'll be sitting there watching this show. I'm like, what are you talking about? And if you're doing it for likes and views and, those eventually, if you get enough viewers and subscribers, you're going to start making money at it. Okay. So, it's not illegal. I think it's immoral if you're not doing it properly, but that's where I get back to saying, you got to be able to look yourself in the mirror. And I live by those words. So
here's my last statement on TV, and then we'll get to our closing. So yeah, I agree. There's some good. There was some good TV shows, and there's still some that's okay. Ghost Hunters in the beginning was really educational. The longer it went, I consider Steve a friend. I actually have his private email, not his business email. So, and we correspond weekly, every other week. So I consider him a friend. So yeah. So so they were good. Ghost Adventures, I have my opinion about. but to his credit, Zach tells you he's an actor. He admits he's an actor. So, but he as a guy, he seems to be a good guy. I just went as a investigator, no, but as a guy, he seems okay. But so there was this other show that I was watching, and I really enjoyed it for like two or three seasons. Ghost Brothers. I really enjoyed it because they were real. You know, they had a day job, and then they went and investigated ghosts. I like that. I like that realism. You know what I'm saying? But then, and nothing against them either, because realistically, you have to tell yourself it was probably more the producers than it was the guys. But I was watching an episode one time, and this is the reason I don't watch anymore. And like I said, it's nothing against them. I still like the guys. I'm actually going to have them on the podcast. But I was watching the episode one time, and they were using apps on the phone, which I'm not an anti-app person. So nobody get mad at me out there. I mean, realistically, your phones are basically mini computers now, so they could be useful if programmed right. But the thing that turned me off was they were using the phone as the EMF detector. And you cannot use a phone as the EMF detector because it produces too much EMF on its own. And that was a bad statement to make to the viewers. So, but yeah, you know, there's good and there's bad. But it's not a good way to get educated. If you want to get educated, like you said, find a legitimate person, a legitimate team. You know, my team, we're happy to train people. We actually have a process. If you want to join my team, me and my team leads interview you. Then we bring you into our next. We have monthly meetings. So our next meeting, we bring you in and we do orientation, and then you get put into training for a while. And how long you're in training just depends on you. It just depends on the person. You know, my team's a large team too. We have 16 people on my team, so you know we have to be careful about that. So yeah, so let's wrap up here, Joe, because we've been on for a while. Tell everybody what you got going on and how to get a hold of you or in the Warren Society, all that fun stuff. And
well, thank you, Ken. I've had a blast. Really, this has been very enjoyable conversation. But you can reach me again, Joe Franke, www.warrensociety.com. If anyone needs help or knows anyone needs help, please reach out to the website. And there's a help button and get in touch with me. My email address is jfranke@warrensociety.com. We also have a Facebook page, a Warren Society Facebook page. You can reach out, messenger. You know, if anybody needs help or has a question or whatever, please, I'm accessible. My wife used to get mad at me because on my business cards, I had my phone number, my cell phone number. She's like, do you really want to have that? I said, look, I want people to know that I'm accessible if they need my help. Text me, call me. Just bear with me. If you send me an email, I get a lot of emails and stuff. I will get back to you. It might take me a few days, you know, but you know, I've got a few things coming up. I'll be at the Maine Paracon. That's coming up on the 6th and 7th of September. I'm really excited about that because I love the state of Maine. I got a lot of family up there, and I'm going to see a lot of good people, a lot of old friends there, and I'm sure I'll meet some new ones. I've got in Connecticut on the 12th and 13th of September. I'm doing lectures with my good friend Bill Slevin. We're going to be talking about those Hollywood horrors, what I talked about, paranormal fact versus fiction. So that's September 12th and 11th at Chatfield Hollow State Park in Connecticut. So if you're in the area, Connecticut, Massachusetts area, please get in touch with me and I can get you registered. Seating is limited, though. There's only like 40 seats available per night. So this year I'm doing 2 nights back to back. I will be on the 20th of September. I'll be in San Antonio at the Black Swan, Victoria Black Swan. It's a 1-day event, but I'll be talking down there, you know, for about an hour or so or longer. I never shut up. It's because I'm so passionate about what I do. But if anybody, if you go to like warrensociety.com, or you can also go to joefranke.com. I put some of my events up there as well. But please, if there's anyone out there listening, if you have a question for me or you need help from the society, we're here for you. There are people out here that can help you. We have a big network. really around the world. If you're anywhere in the world, if you need help, we can probably get you the help you need. And so I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to mention that. And I said, Asia and Bill, good friends. Asia's a great manager, as you know. She's wonderful. And I just, love her to pieces. And Bill and my entire team, too many to mention, but we've put together a good team of people with a lot of experience. So
Yeah, yeah. Age is great. I mean, uh, yeah, she reached out to me because I was going to have father on, the father on here, and she's like, we need to reschedule. And then I was like, I got to talk to her. And I was like, well, if you're looking for new clients, I was like, I'm kind of looking for, through because I used to speak a lot, but I had brain and spine surgery, so I lost 3 years, and I haven't spoke since I've been back. So,
well, get back into it. Get back into it.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
You're very knowledgeable.
So yeah, Bill's going to be on here. He was supposed to be on here the 26th, but we're going to have to reschedule because apparently he got an event booked now. So, but I'll get him back on there. And Bill may be joining you next year at my expo. I'm waiting for him to confirm. But
well, that would be terrific.
Yeah, but
Bill and I are old friends. Bill's a wealth of knowledge. He's been doing this, I don't know, 35, 36 years himself. So, I've aligned myself with some really good people. You got Father Ken, Father Bob, who, are like my spiritual advisors. They're wonderful people. And I couldn't do this work without them. I mean, I couldn't do it alone. I just can't do it. And I want to give a quick shout out to my wife, too, Laurel, because I wouldn't be where I am today without her. And she's been with me since day one. We were just a young couple dating when I met Ed and Lorraine Warren, and like they say, that as the rest is, as they say, is history. Here I am, 40 years has gone by, and now I probably feel like I'm 90. But but the weird thing is, and I say this with all the love in the world, Ed and Lorraine Warren were my age now when I met them. So this has come full circle for me, because they were around 58, 59 years old when I met them. And now that's how old I am. I'm 57 going on 58. I know I don't look it though. I look like I'm 95 probably. It just brings a lot of fond memories to mind to talk about it. I love talking about the work and what I do. And I also love to help anybody that needs it, whether they're involved in this or not,
So
Let's just all work together and be friends.
We're actually about the same age, Joe. I'm a little bit younger than you. I'm 51, but
you're a puppy. You're just a puppy.
so since you like to talk so much, Joe, I'm going to have you talk both days next year. You want to talk both days next year?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I mean, if there's a particular subject, let me know.
At least one day, I would like for you to talk about the Hollywood thing. That would be a good subject. But I don't want you to talk about that both days. Give somebody something different. But next year will be the first year that the expo goes to 2 days. It will be the 5th year for it. But we've always just been 1 day. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting how my expo started. So Graves County, Kentucky, which is where I live, they've adopted Halloween as their thing. So they have what they call 100 graves in October, and they spent like $2 million in advertising.
Cool. So I love Halloween.
Yeah, so I think it goes with being in the field, Joe.
So it does.
It
does.
So they have some kind of big event every weekend in October. We also have 2 of the top rated haunted attractions in Graves County in the state of Kentucky. We have 2 of the top 10. So Halloween's a big thing. Well, 4 years ago now, they asked me to put together a Paracon, because that's what they call it. And
that's a lot of work.
So I only had 6 months, Joe. They only gave me 6 months. So I put together this Paracon in 6 months. We had it in the conference room at the library. So that's what we had. I had 5 speakers. 3 vendors. That's all I
Nothing
have.
wrong with that. My first love was I started lecturing about 29 years ago, and in public libraries. I love public libraries. I just, the patrons that come in to see me speak are wonderful. Most people are just people that want to hear a good ghost story. But I do get a lot of teams now with like I said, with the internet, there's a lot of teams of people that want to learn and they want to be educated. And like I said, I don't know everything, but I'm happy to share with anybody that's willing to listen what I have learned over the years.
And that's
But
the
I
way I
do
am.
love public libraries are great.
Yeah, I'm actually doing a paranormal 101 is what I'm calling it, a paranormal 101 lecture, and it's actually going to be at the public library in Paducah. So yeah, I love public libraries. So, okay, I've kept you on here enough, Joe, but I appreciate you being on here.
Thank you
I hate
very
to,
much, Ken. God bless you and all your listeners. Thank
God
you.
bless you. God bless them. And you can now please add me and Ken Tim Paranormal to your network in Kentucky. We got you guys back in Kentucky.
Awesome.
Kentucky and Tennessee, we do, but that's why we're Ken Tim Paranormal, Kentucky, Tennessee. So we got you down here. So you can count on us.
Thank you so much, my friend. I hope
All right.
you'll have me back on in the future. We'll talk some more.
I would definitely have you back on. So, all right. So here we go. Boom.